So joining us tonight from his associate's computer, Chris, is Henry Gifford. And Henry came to my attention when I bought his book. And I'm not sure if my camera's on, but his book is really fascinating. I recommend it to everyone. The main reason I bought it was because it's got a lot of really great descriptions and images for the basic things that we see every day. So check out the book. It's got a quiz in it. There's lots of good answers and the images that help explain the basics of heat transfer and moisture intrusion and thermal energy in ways that you can then use that same language to communicate with your clients. So Henry is going to talk to us tonight about the mechanics that move air through a building. And you can put questions in the chat and we'll pose those questions as we get going. And without further ado, Henry, good to see you.
Hi, everybody. So I define building science as the movement through buildings of heat, air, water, light, sound, fire, and insects, but I should say pests because it includes rats and those things. In Europe, they call it building physics. And today I will speak about air leaks through buildings, how you can visually observe, how you can measure if you want to go that far. And then I'll talk about ventilation systems, how we ventilate buildings. And that's what I'll cover tonight. So there's three mechanisms that move air through a building. Wind, everybody knows about. Fans, that is the fan in the furnace, a ventilation fan, window fan you put in your window to stay cool in the summer maybe. And then there's the stack effect, which is hot air rising through the building like it rises through a chimney because you heat a fluid, it gets more buoyant, it gets lighter, spreads out. And in the summer, the stack effect moves air downwards through a building. And because the temperature difference indoors and out is greater in the winter, the stack effect is much more significant in the winter than it is in the summer. But the stack effect is why tall buildings have revolving doors, because otherwise you couldn't open the door or would slam and squish your fingers because the air pulling in at the lobby and pulling up like the building's acting like a chimney. One of these three mechanisms that has the greatest magnitude is the wind. The biggest average, I don't know, a taller building has more stack effect, but stack effect is significant in a one-story building, much more significant in a two-story building. And it's all the time that there's a temperature difference. Fans, I don't know how much they're running and how big they are. The wind varies. But in terms of the biggest one at any moment in the year, that's the wind.
Ask them if they can see advancing.
I just advanced the slide.
We're seeing it. It's fine. You're fine. Keep
Good,
going.
okay. Because sometimes it doesn't work here, so okay. So this is next to our office in New York City. And this is, they were building a building and they put a tarp up. And so the volume of air enclosed within the tarp is hotter than outdoors. It's, I think, connected to the building because there's no windows installed yet in the building under construction. So you see the air is rising up. It's winter, so you can tell without looking at the guy with the jacket on, you could say, ah, that must be winter because the tarp is puffing out at the top and pulling in at the bottom. So that shows you the magnitude of the force that pulls air in the bottom of a 5-story building and pushes air out the top of a 5-story building. And here's a taller building. They're changing windows today, the day I took this photo. And you see up at the top, the blue tarps are puffed out. And in the middle, not much happening. And at the bottom, if you want to sound fancy, you call it the neutral pressure plane. And at the bottom, the stack effect is pulling the tarp in. This is, of course, winter. You can tell from no leaves in the tree, and you can tell from the stack effect moving the air upwards within the building. And the picture on the left here is a tall building. You see that they took the bricks off to work on the masonry on the corner of the building. And you see the tarp pulled in basically all the way up until a few floors before the top, you see it puffed out. The photo at right is a close-up of the top of the photo at left. And where you can see. So you can see at the photo at right, a close-up of the top of the photo at left. And you see the tarp puffing out high up. The neutral pressure plane is very high because it's a very leaky building. Any questions? Any way to people ask questions, or the typed questions somebody can?
We don't have any questions yet, so why don't
Okay.
I think this makes a lot of sense. You got the lower part is under negative pressure, the top part is under positive pressure, and there's a neutral pressure plane right in the middle between the two.
Well, in this case, the neutral pressure plane is up near the top. It's about 4 stories. It's halfway up the right photo.
Because
You
we see
see-
that in houses too, where you see in the siding, where the siding, the vinyl siding, the aluminum siding, you'll see the dirt at the seams up close to the gable end, and maybe even the top part of the second floor, but not down below.
Right, under the eaves, you see dirt streaks of the air pushing out there. I've looked for a photo like that. I didn't find it today, but so this is a apartment house in Las Vegas. The guy who made the drawings for my book, his wife was a ballet dancer. She got a job in a show, so I was going to Las Vegas a lot. And I took this photo. So what would somebody as a home inspector think of the health implications of living in this building? Well, the bottom half is a car parking garage. I don't see open sides to the car garage like I see in most buildings. I see a few grills there, but it's a pathetically small amount of opening. And then the people live above. So when sun hits the building, it warms the garage, and then the car engines, they warm up, and you have 1,000 pounds of hot metal under the hood, or 500 pounds. I don't know how much an engine weighs. And all that heat is driving upwards. Plus the building itself, if it's winter, it gets cold there at night. It's a desert climate, Las Vegas. So the building itself, suppose the garage had no stack effect because it was all open on the sides, like most parking garages are, completely open, no walls. So there's no stack effect within the garage. Maybe NASA could measure something, I don't know, but for practical purposes, no. If there was no stack effect in the garage, it would still be dangerous to live in this building because the 10 or so floors of apartments there are heated during the winter. So they would be pulling on the bottom. And so any carbon monoxide and other nasty stuff from car exhaust in the garage would be pulled upwards into the bottom of the apartment part of the building by the stack effect. But as the garage is not enclosed in any significant way, there's probably an upwards pressure on the top of the garage combined with the bottom of the apartments pulling upwards. So any leaks between the garage and the house, there's going to be plenty of car exhaust going up into the building. So if you're an inspector and you were called to inspect an apartment here, you might say, listen, move across the street, go buy an apartment down the block. If all else is equal, buy it down the block because this is a bad situation that nobody's going to go and fix. So here's windows being installed. So you see a completed window installation at the right. and a window installation in process at the left. So the whole window industry and the whole country is united. They all work together as a team to make sure that what never happens in the history of the industry is that somebody goes to a building, measures for a replacement window, orders the manufacturer of the window in the factory, transports the window to the site, takes the old window out, and when attempting to install the new window, finds that the new window is too big for the opening. As far as I know, that has never happened in the history of the window industry, because everybody as a team works together to make sure all the windows fit. In other words, they make them extra too small. As you can see here, the window on the left is a big gap around the sides. Somebody could have done a much better job of measuring and bought a window significantly larger. They come to every ½ inch, I think. So they could have gone 3 or 4/2 of an inch bigger. Instead, people install windows that are too small and they fill the gap with product. What product? I don't know, stuff. And you see on the right, they cap it with sheet metal, which has leaks at the connections, and then they caulk it. And they say, don't worry, it's sealed. Well, we have a joke in our side of the industry. It goes like this. Don't worry, it's sealed. That to us is a joke. Caulking exposed to outdoors degrades because of ultraviolet light, and it degrades because of water. Yes, I've seen it on caulking tubes, not made for constant exposure to water. And this is not constant, but it's often enough. And it gets degraded because the aluminum in the window changes size significantly with temperature, while the brick does not. And the brick doesn't change temperature very quickly either. So the brick moves less with change in temperature and doesn't change temperature much. The aluminum windows change temperature a lot and quickly, especially that thin sheet metal doesn't hold much heat and it just cools up, often heats up and cools down. So the movement goes by thermal, it's exposed to the sun, so there's a lot of thermal movement, and the UV and the water and the caulking breaks down. It's not the fault of the chemist who made the caulking. So this is one source of air leaks. So when in a building with replacement windows, you look and you try and get a sense if they did it this badly or maybe they did a little bit better job. Here's my hand going in there. If you can put your hand there, that's bad news. So here's my old high school. They built this extension on the left. It sticks out and underneath it's open. Cars can drive there to get in the parking lot. So on the right, you see an infrared photo where I set the camera. White is hot and black is cold. I'm not smart enough to have that rainbow 6 color. I can't figure that out. So I just have black and white. So you see the white is brightest under the windows because there's a heater there. And that's the right place for heater to be, by the windows. But you see the top right hand corner of the structure is also white. Most of the top, for about 4 feet of height, it's black, so it's colder than the rest. So what's going on there is, with the exception of the white part at the right toward the corner of the building, the parapet is cold. The top of the wall is cold because it's a parapet that is a wall around the edge of a roof. It's probably 36 or 42 inches high. So the last 4 feet or so of the top 4 feet or so of the wall is cold because there's no building behind it heating it. It's unheated on both sides. It's exposed to outdoor air on both sides. So it's black, it's cold. So that brings up the question, why is the parapet warm at the right? That's because warm air from inside the building is leaking out there. You notice it's hotter than the wall below it. So there's some direct connection, like where the roof ceiling structure meets the wall structure, there's an air leak. and air from in the building is being pushed out there. This new part of the building has the misfortune to have an HVAC system where they attempt to deliver heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in one set of ducts, and all kinds of chaos results. So this system might be pressurizing the building, might not, but definitely the stack effect is going to be pushing air up and out there. The black spot below the windows might be water, or it might be cold air being sucked in. If it's cold air sucking in, then this part of the building is probably under negative pressure, the whole area. And despite being at negative pressure, air is still leaking out the top. So here's a flushometer serving a toilet or a urinal in a movie theater or an airport or someplace where they have the flushometers they use instead of tanks, because the tanks would be way too much maintenance. So you see somebody made a too large hole. They made a hole too large for the pipe and covered it almost all the way with that discussion plate, the chrome plate there on the pipe. But air is leaking all around, and the air goes across the bumpy wall and leaves dirt behind. So this dirt is the tell that you can see with a visual inspection. It's a tell that air is leaking through that hole. And for a lot of hours of the year, it's been leaking out of that hole. It might also leak in at a different time of year, or when fans are different, or maybe when the movie theater is open, it leaks out, and when it's closed, it leaks in. But you don't, there's no way to tell from looking that I know of to see if air is ever moving in that hole, because the dust from moving in would be collected on somewhere inside the wall. But significant portion of the year, depending how often that wall got cleaned, there's a lot of air moving out of that hole. Here's fiberglass insulation that was behind, like above a storefront. The sign was there, and they took the sign down, and you see that for a long time air has been leaking through the fiberglass insulation. Some people call it filter glass because it's not a barrier to air leaking at all. So when you see a window with a huge gap, a window being installed with a huge gap between the window and the wall, and people put fiberglass in there, that's a waste of fiberglass. It's not stopping the air leaks. It's like wearing a sweater on a bicycle, but no, like if it's in the fall and it's chilly, wear a sweater and then a windbreaker, you're talking business. You put a sweater, doesn't do much. So if you have a building with good insulation, but no air barrier, it's not a good situation. The insulation doesn't work well, especially if it's fiberglass. So here's fiberglass in the ceiling, and you see the 5 dirt spots. They correspond to the 5 holes in the back of the electric box, the light fixture box there that got moved out of the way. So this shows that lots of air moves through light fixtures. It used to be that Home Depot, you could special order light fixtures that were airtight. I think they stock them now. Last I checked, the hi-hats that go recessed in the ceiling, you can buy them airtight. But usually people don't bother, so air's leaking all over the place. Here's domestic hot water, and return water pipes in an apartment house going from one floor to the other. And I put on the blueprint as part of my job designing this building. I designed the mechanical stuff. I put on the blueprint what size holes to drill. And it's also a note, the hole can't be more than, I forget, X, 1 inch or so bigger than the diameter, not the radius of the pipes. But it was much easier to just use one drill bit to make all the holes for the whole building. There are code-approved details to fireproof around where the pipe goes through the floor ceiling assembly. This is fire caulk. It's like $500 for a 5-gallon bucket. It's expensive stuff. And you can goop it on there, and you have to put some mineral wool in there. And they sell special sleeves and all, but when you have a huge hole like this, it's like so much caulk and it's not going to work well. The approved detail is approved because they had a not ridiculous hole. They had a reasonably sized hole, and they tested and it passed. So this is going to leak a lot of air and also smoke if somebody's smoking. Also mice and rats and bed bugs and roaches and everything's going through this hole. Here's a ceiling fan. You can look at the blades on the left. You see the leading edge of the blades has dust impacted. On the right side,
what they call intumescent caulk.
I think so. I hear it called more, they call it fire caulk. The word intumescent I've heard more with respect to a special paint that goes on steel. So if you have structural steel that's not otherwise fireproofed, which is scary stuff because it's usually not fireproof very well, and it softens in a fire and building falls down. Sometimes with firefighters, and I mean, by the time a fire is that bad, there's nobody alive. So, but the building falling can kill firefighters outside the building. Anyhow, yeah, I've heard the term intumescent paint, and it's probably accurate to call it intumescent caulk also. But here they call it fire caulk, but different regional variations and names. But I think intumescent means it, or implies, even if it's not the definition of the word, it puffs up to be a foam in a fire. And I don't know if this caulk behaves that way. I know the paint does that. So here's dust impact on the left side of the fan and the right side. No, the right side, you see the trailing edges of the blades. No dust impacted. And you see the dust on the ceiling. The side of the photo toward us, you don't see much dust because we're probably not looking the camera's position where you can't see it, but you look on the other side, it's collected on all the little bumps in the textured ceiling. Here's a non-airtight hi-hat light. So there's air leaks within the light and air leaks between the light and its surrounding bracket, and there's surely air leaks between the light and the gypsum board, the sheetrock. In an architecture firm, we don't call it sheetrock because it's a trade name, so we call it gypsum board. People say, what's gypsum board? It's sheetrock. So here's a standard electric box being airtight. In New York, we still have metal boxes for
Sure.
all construction. There's no plastic boxes here yet. So that's fiberglass mesh. And then that's duct mastic. It comes water-based now. It doesn't stink up the job. And you put it on with a paintbrush. And there it is all done. And it's all nice. So now you have an airtight electric box. So you don't have big air leaks to the box. There's somebody, she's actually an architect, but the amount of supervising the contractors to get it done, it's less work to just do it ourselves. We go and we goop the boxes. They sell airtight boxes, which is nice, but then you poke a hole for the wire and you don't have an airtight box. So after the electrician hangs the boxes and puts the wires, we air tighten the boxes.
Henry, can you elaborate on what the point you were making with that ceiling fan? You had the dust. What you said that you're saying dust on the leading edge and not on the back edge. Because I guess that's impacting the dust suspended in the air.
Yes, the leading edges impact the dust and catch the dust, and it sort of gets caked on there. And the trailing edges do not impact the dust. So this tells you which direction the fan was rotating, which is not useful in any way I can tell. People say it's different, the fan blowing up or blowing down. I don't know if it matters, but this is obvious. Everybody knows fans turn. There's a leading edge and a trailing edge. And so this demonstrates how dust collects. And you could read backwards to say, okay, this dust pattern indicates a airflow pattern, which is familiar. It's hitting the leading edges and the fan blows the air up toward the ceiling and out. And as the air moves out along the rough, bumpy, textured ceiling, dust collects on the rough, bumpy texture pieces. So this demonstrates dust collecting on the fan and the bumps. And it teaches you your instincts to recognize dust patterns as indicative of airflow patterns. So the fan is familiar, the airflow and the movement of the blades is familiar. So when you look at the pattern, this teaches you, oh, okay, when I see dust, I can now read the dust to see where there's big air leaks. So if you're inspecting a house and you see a big air leak in one or two places and nowhere else, you tell the people, look, a big percentage of the air leak in this house is coming through these two places. It's easy to fix. You don't have to go nuts and caulk every window and door and weather strip it. These two places are the main low-hanging fruit. You want to make the house more comfortable. Fix it over there.
Of course, you seal it there, you're going to create, it's going to start moving somewhere else as long as you still have the pressure difference, right?
No, theorize the extreme. Suppose there's no leaks. You have the pressure difference, you have no leak. So you can, there's a website called Engineering Toolbox, and they have formulas for fluid flow through an orifice. Orifice is a fancy word for an opening. And in steam systems, we put a little copper plate on the inlet to steam radiators to meter the steam. And we drill different size holes for different size radiators. And there's a formula there. And it's nice because it's there and you can click on it and get an answer, you know what size hole to drill. And these formulas are nice because you can see the factors which go in, especially if they use words instead of Greek letters. Most engineers, I don't know, they put Greek letters and then next to it they have the words. I just write the words so I can see. But if you look at these formulas, it's very nice because it trains your guts to see, okay, they're not asking what color is it painted, because obviously the color you paint the orifice doesn't matter. A yellow fan, a blue fan, a red fan would still have the dust collecting the same way. So you see, okay, what factors are in there? And it says pressure difference and size. That's it. For it's caveat, it has to be smoothed edge orifice, and it can't be, the flow can't be supersonic. Like you get a whistle, that's another formula maybe. So you see the factors that go in, and that trains your guts to say, oh, okay, it just matters the size of the hole. Well, another caveat is that it has to be a round hole. So a long, skinny leak, like the crack around a door, does not have much middle. And a round hole has more middle. So as the pressure difference varies, it's non-linear. So if you double the pressure difference, you don't double the flow in a long, skinny leak, but you'll double the flow in a round hole. Back in the day, we used to test buildings for air leakage. Later on, I'll have a picture of a fan door, also known as a blower door. We used to test at 3 different pressure differences between indoor and out and plot the curve. And the curve would tell us whether we have one big leak or a lot of really small leaks.
Well, now, wait a minute. That is interesting because we were always told back in the day, and I guess I'm talking 1970s, 1980s, in the early days of the environmental movement, that that crack around the door, you could take that crack and calculate the area of that, and imagine that a round hole or a square hole with that same area, and imagine that that's how big of a hole you have in your house. And you're saying actually it's not equivalent. Is that what you're saying?
It's not equivalent.
Interesting.
A plumber hired me to design like 2 weeks ago, some pump. There's a yard that floods and going to pump the water. It was a few hundred feet to the building to stop the flooding because otherwise it runs into the basement of the building. And we had 2 pumps and 2 pipes and 2 3-inch pipes. And then using the engineering toolbox, there's Darcy Weisbach formula for fluids. That's any fluid, including compressible fluids, and there's a simplified version, Hazen-Williams, for water. And I calculated, it tells you the pressure drop for 100 feet. And the flow, I looked at the sump pumps, how many gallons per minute, and put it in there. And so I was surprised to see that 1 4-inch pipe handles more flow at a given pressure drop than 2 3-inch pipes. So the 2 3-inch pipes can handle less water than 1 4-inch pipe. And that's because there's so much more middle in the 4-inch pipe. So a lot of these relationships are way nonlinear. And so, yeah, we used to measure it 25, 50, and 75 pascals. Pascal is I think 1,000 pascals per atmosphere. Atmosphere is 14.7 psi. It's 1,002 for 1 bar, like a bar in an atmosphere, a little different in Europe. Even they're nicer unit systems, a little goofy, but you can, Google as unit conversion of Pascal. So 50 pascals lifts water about 1/4 of an inch. So the whole industry of making buildings efficient and airtight, we just measured 50 pascals. But the 3 measurements days, that's back in the day. I mean, Chris, whose computer I'm using, she's the first architect in the US to own a blower door. Depending how you count Betsy Pettit, who married to a guy in between them, they own a blower door. I don't know what the commerce property laws in Massachusetts, we can make jokes, but Chris was one of the early people. We still, first name basis, with like a guy who made his own blower door because nobody sold them at the time. He used a cabin pressure fan from a DC-10. It's Terry Brennan, his name. And then Gary Nelson in Minneapolis was doing research, and he had the idea that a blower door should be a contractor's tool, not a researcher's tool. So he started making them and selling them. And now a lot of codes say, yeah, you have to blow a door. You can't have this leaky house. But anyhow, yeah, the crack method, that's, I think, from ASHI. Well, we used to make fun of it a little, like back in the day, we would renovate houses next to abandoned houses, and we would say, well, our crack method is you look and see if the people next door smoke a crack. Because if the people in the house next door smoking crack, come back within a few years, that house burned down and there's an empty lot there. So we have to have heaters on the side of the house. So normally a row house, you don't need heaters. There's no heat load to the sides to the other adjoining buildings. But if there's empty lots on the side, there's a bigger heat load. And so we used to say, well, our crack method is to see if the neighbors are smoking crack, because then there's going to be no building. There's going to be a temperature difference of 2,000 degrees for about an hour when the fire's burning. And then, but yeah, the crack method and that door crack, it varies. And then the air has to go in and out around the moldings. Listen, it was better than nothing back in the day. When you didn't have a infrared camera, you didn't have a blown door. It's better than nothing.
So there's probably a lot in that website you're talking about. For instance, we could see easy to make a misunderstanding about the relationship between, 2 2-inch pipes and 1 4-inch pipe, for instance.
I've been sizing pipes for decades. I design heating systems for apartment houses, hot water-based heating systems. And my instincts are still not sufficiently trained to just throw a number and instinctively get it. No, it's a beautiful thing to be able to look it up there. I prefer like a slide rule kind of thing. Bell and Gossett gives it out a thing called a System Sizer, SYZER. They'll try and get you to get some app, which I don't like because you can't see the next number, but they had this round slide rule. If anybody wants to take me a minute, walk across the office, show you mine. But well, I'll get it right now. Hold on.
I was going to say, this is Bob. The reason that the holes make such difference is it's the area of the opening is pi r squared. So a 2 to 3, if you go from 2 inches to 3 inches, you're doubling the surface area, and goes up by whatever the square of the radius is.
Well, and then if you think about the crack versus the round hole, the crack is going to have a whole lot more friction at the surface areas. Also, there's much more surface area therefore there's going to be more friction.
Yeah, so if you have a cracker on a door, if you double the pressure drop between indoors and out, rough numbers, you'll double the air leakage. And if you have a hole, you double the pressure drop, you'll more than double the air leakage. I'm sorry, I couldn't find my slide rule, but back in the days, what kind of like my father's days, people had slide rules. It was like these bunch of rulers that slid along each other, and you look up the numbers and you kind of see the next number and the one before and the one after, and it trained your intuition better than clicking on a website or clicking on a software, much better. And you understood these relationships. But somebody borrowed mine. I don't know where it went, but if you can get a Bell and Gossett, it's owned by Xylem now. I think they bought Amtrol 2 XYLEM. See if you see a local rep to give you one of those, the round slide rule ones, not an app for your phone. So, yeah, before we had a blower doors, the crack method, and this was the early mid 90s. We started using. Chris Benedict and I started using a blower door. I have a picture of her using one later in the presentation here. So here's a box caulked to the gypsum board. So the box got air tightened in the back, which you can't see here. And then now it's caulked to the gypsum board. So here's a doorway with a dust streak. So right next to the hinge there where the blue arrow is pointing to, that's the dust streak. So the air moved through in the path described by the red arrow. And when the air made the sharp turn, it's like the bugs in a windshield on your car. The air goes up and over your windshield and the bugs are too heavy to move that quickly and they splatter on your windshield. So the bugs get separated out of the airstream by density and more mass, I guess you'd say. So likewise, the dust got separated out of the leaking airstream because it's heavier than the air, got deposited. So if you saw two streaks, one just to the right of the one you see, then it would tell you the air leaks both directions equally. That is, if the air is equally dusty, both airstreams, which indoor air is usually more dusty than outdoor air, so who knows? It's kind of impossible for indoor air to be cleaner unless you're filtering it, which is another story. So here's dust streaked air. So this was going out. This one was going in toward the hinge. This air leaking out. So this is probably an upper floor. And here's air leaking from that color. I know that there's a real estate company I take care of the boilers, and this is leaking out of the basement, I think, leaking through a basement door. So anyhow, you see a lot of dust there. So if you're inspecting a building, a house or a bigger building, a lot more people live in multifamily these days, whatever, you could see, hey, there's air leaking here. We're above or below the neutral pressure plane, dominant time of the year, etc. This is a door in Europe. There's not a lot of air going to leak through this door. They have 3 weather seals, and they don't rub, they squeeze. It's a beautiful thing. They take energy seriously over there. So here's Chris Benedict, and that's a blower door. It's more probably would be called a fan door because it's a fan, not a blower, whatever. So there's an aluminum, 4 aluminum bars that pop out and fit in the door frame. They adjust, of course, because lots of door frames are different than others. And you put that nylon piece there, and it makes a decently airtight barrier between one side of the door frame and the other. Here, Chris is inside of an apartment, and on the other side of the red nylon shroud is the vestibule of a 3-story building. And the door between the vestibule and outdoors is open. So it's basically one side of the red nylon shroud is outdoors, in effect, because there's a wide open door on the other side of it. And the other side is, of course, indoors. You see this dust on the floor. They didn't finish the floor yet. It's kind of like late in construction, but not too late to fix problems. So there's gauges there which measure the pressure difference between indoors and out. And there's a pitot tube, which measures air velocity. That's the way airplanes measure their speed. There's a little tube sticking out. I'll have a picture later in the presentation. So a pitot tube measures the velocity of the air, and the area there is known. Not that the air is flowing through all parts of that opening at the same speed. There's probably a bunch of pitot tubes, and Gary Nelson owns his own wind tunnel over there at Minneapolis Blower Door, where they make these blower doors. It's called the Energy Conservatory in Minneapolis. But so you go in there and you say, oh, there's a wind tunnel. We have our own wind tunnel. So they get this right. So it measures the pressure difference. So we said it at the back in the day at 25, 50, and 75 pascals. Now you would just measure it at 50. And another one of those needles reads pressure difference, and another scale on the same gauge computes cubic feet per minute, air volume, flow, and we usually pull negative on the house, but some of the testing protocols say go negative and positive. Usually doesn't read very different. But you could sell blower door tests. Yeah, people might want to know it's unhealthy to have a lot of air leaks, and it's a lot of more energy used. So when you inspect a home, they might want to know. So this is a bit of a thing to drag around, but you could measure. We now use a smaller fan than that for a 30-family building because we do them nice and airtight. But these were some of the first attempted airtight houses in the country. This is what we were working on here. And, but it's all over the range. The real good, the passive house standard. So real energy efficient houses built to their passive house standard. We designed the first 2 apartment buildings in the US to meet the passive house standard. We do all our stuff for no extra cost. We don't take your money for us to make a social statement about saving energy. We believe all buildings should be built right. So we do for 0 extra cost. If you go to a conference, there's a guy who works with a company, builds 10,000 homes a year, and he makes them 3% more efficient. That guy is really saving a lot of energy. Then there's a guy who does NASA level, like super, like shave one more penny off. And that guy's maybe more interesting. And we're over here talking about what you can do for no budget. Just the same budget as crappy minimum. We hate all the rules and the grants, and it's kind of disgusting. So that's what we do. And the hot water experts are from California because there's not much heating and cooling. The air conditioning guys from Florida, and the real good heating people from Canada, whatever. We're the no extra money people. So what is ventilation? So the code says, like, if you've got a hospital where air quality is really important and disease can spread, you can take the dirty air out of one room, put it in a duct, and serve it to all the other rooms in the hospital, and that's considered ventilation. That's what's done in office buildings. You have HVAC, you have this big box with a fan, and you have return air from many rooms, many parts of the whole big floor of an office building, or you have a floor plate. And this is what's done in homes. The return air takes whatever's coming from one part of the building and spreads it to all the rooms. This is what's done in hospitals, schools, houses, office buildings. And the code says you serve and use air, that's considered ventilation. So some people say we're going to do natural ventilation, which means you have no ventilation. They say, well, we're not using mechanical ventilation. Mechanical, it's kind of like culturally, they make it with a spin that that's bad for mechanical. We're going to have natural. And what they do is they say they're going to orient the building toward the prevailing wind. I'm like, well, every building has 4 sides, right? I mean, I saw a round building once, but basically every building has 4 sides. So one side is always facing the wind, right? What do you mean it's facing the prevailing wind? I guess in a sailboat, you could turn the boat around and face the prevailing wind, but what are they talking about? It just sounds good. It's just like a politician talking. We're going to orient the building toward the prevailing wind. Okay, good luck. People did studies about how many people open windows, and somebody really smart did it. They say we're going to only study houses on the corner, because then you can drive around and walk around with a clipboard and you can look at all four sides of the house from the sidewalk. You don't have to ask somebody, hey, do you have a dog? Do you mind if I look in your backyard to see if you have your windows open? Who are you? So they found very few people open windows. Windows let in noise and air that's too hot, air that's too cold, air that's too dry, air that's too humid. It lets in rain and snow and insects and criminals. So for good reasons, people don't use windows for ventilation very much. And so if you want to ventilate, but don't just point to a window and say that's ventilation. Is sloppy construction a good way to protect a person's health? No. Contractors say, well, walls have to breathe. Well, what does breathe mean? It means anything you want it to mean. It means leaks of water, air, insect. What do you mean? It's like a general excuse for construction defects. People say a wall has to breathe. What do you mean breathe? They just get a blank stare. It's like you have poor social skills if you ask a question like that. So to ventilate, you move air only. So a good ventilation system just does ventilating. You're not trying to do heating and cooling in the same system. I know for a single family home, everything has to be built as cheap as possible as soon as you add it in with the furnace. But my definition of ventilate means add fresh outdoor air and remove stale indoor air. That's what ventilation means. You might also dehumidify the building by drawing the ventilation air. It's easier than having standalone dehumidifiers. And in the region, the mid-Atlantic, especially toward the Carolinas and all, this is more and more of a concern. There are many reasons why buildings are becoming more vulnerable to mold each year. And so dehumidification, the newer the building, the more vulnerable the materials are to mold. Wood, mold can eat it, but it prefers plywood and it much prefers OSB and even more likes paper, gypsum board. So plaster wall will kill the mold. Plaster is a pH of 14. You're not going to see mold on a plaster wall in significant quantities. Gypsum board, yes. We used to build with pieces of wood, and then wood, and then wood, and then metal studs. Metal studs don't absorb anything. So if you have condensation, you have liquid water instead of it being absorbed at one part of the day and then desorbed at night or whatever. Anyhow, so buildings are becoming more vulnerable for a lot of reasons. And maybe you want to dehumidify the ventilation. People also filter ventilation air. That mostly makes people feel good. The really dangerous dust in the air is what they call PM 2.5 particle matter, 2.5 microns larger. So 2.5 microns in size or smaller. So the really, really tiny dust that a filter will not catch. So all during COVID, I was hearing about filter the air, filter the viruses. Viruses are too small to be seen with a microscope because of the limit of the size of the wavelength of the light. Nobody can make a microscope that can see a virus. And you think you're going to catch that with a filter? Yeah. Good luck.
Well, don't they adhere to moisture particles that are in the air and dust particles that are in the air that are filtered out? I mean, isn't that why I'm mad?
Well, the air doesn't have moisture particles. There was, in my book, there's a section that about humidity, indoor humidity and health. In Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, they put two pigs in a room. One of them had the flu and one of them did not have the flu. And they used pigs because their respiratory system and more importantly, their immune system is similar to people. And they put the temperature 30 degrees, 50 degrees, 70 degrees, made no difference. And did the other pig get sick? They put the humidity low, all the other pigs got sick. They put it medium, some of the other pigs got sick. They put it high, none of the other pigs got sick. So they said part of it is a change in the upper respiratory system and also the immune I don't know, some big long medical word, the immune, some things are different in the humidity. But the main factor is that the virus is a piece of, like DNA is the two spiral, it's half of it, like RNA, piece floating around in the air, and you cough it out with some mucus around it, basically some water and like snots. And in dry air, the water evaporates and makes the virus lighter, and the virus can float around for a couple of days, and then you inhale it and get sick. If the air is humid, the water surrounding the viral particle does not evaporate, and it falls to the floor and sticks to the floor. So, yeah, viruses are a little bit sticky, and so they can stick to the filter. You're not going to have liquid water particles in normal indoor air unless you're taking a shower at the moment. So they can stick to dust, which gets filtered out, yes. And they can stick to the filter, and there's various sticking. There's van der Waals forces, and maybe some magnetism and some other things. There's 3 to 4 mechanisms like that, but lots and lots and lots of them go through the filter. And I've never seen anybody measure how many get through and how many don't. I guess they wouldn't get funding, or the filter people would be mad at them or whatever. I never saw anybody study it or propose to study or discuss that question even. But it's just somehow assumed that you have finer and finer filters like MERV 13. And the limit is not where they actually work well. It's the limit for what the fan can do without having to have a fan the size of a Ferris wheel. But I don't have much faith in filters, but lots of people do.
Let's plan on about 8 more minutes, Henry.
Okay. So 3 types of ventilation. You can supply air, only supply it, or exhaust it only, or combine supply and exhaust. Supply doesn't work. Supply only doesn't work because you're putting cold and hot and humid and dry air into the house, into the building. No, nobody does that. But so basically you have exhaust only, or so this is exhaust only. You have a fan above the stove. You have a fan in the bathroom. It pushes air out, and air comes in leaks. It works. It's the dominant kind we have in this country. The code might say a bathroom fan has to move 50 CFM intermittently or 20 continuously. I like continuously because it can be a smaller and quieter fan, a smaller duct, and you have it all the time. The exhaust only has disadvantages. You see, there's air coming from the adjacent bathroom into these people's kitchen. It's coming from the hallway through the entrance door to the apartment into the kitchen. It's going all over the place. You can't plan it. Exhaust only is okay. It's coming through leaks, which is not great, but it's okay. It's the dominant type in this country. A little better is you put a trickle vent in a window. So this is the outdoor view. This is the indoor view of a trickle vent. It has these little grills that put the air outwards and upwards toward the ceiling, and there's a little moving piece in there which moves if wind tries to move too much air into the house, more than 25 or 30 CFM for most models, it'll close. If you have a very airtight apartment building or hotel, these are a good idea. His operable ones, people can close them, generates phone calls. Here's a simplified diagram of an apartment building. So the trickle vent is in the bedroom and living room. That's where the windows are. The air moves from the driest to the wettest, that is the bathroom and kitchen, and then out. It's moving from the cleanest to the dirtiest and out. So this is good for hotels and apartments, which are decently airtight. For a single family home, standalone, exposed on 4 sides, if you build it basically as airtight as you can get, like we call it 0.6 air changes an hour at 50 pascals. So that is the whole volume of the whole house being changed 0.6 times an hour at 50 pascals. That's like passive house level, like really good. Even if you get it that airtight, you probably have enough leaks, unplanned, inadvertent leaks, that these things don't do any good. But if you have an apartment where you only have exposure to outdoors on one side and you have decent air barriers, see the lines between apartments and between apartments and common areas, do these. Here's a wiring diagram for a special switch. The hot and neutral are feeding the switch at the left. Coming out the right side of the switch, the blue wire connects to the light and the red wire connects to the fan. So when you turn the light off, when you turn the switch off, the light goes off right away, and the fan will stay running 5 or 10 minutes, depending how you set it. Behind the switch plate, there's a knob you turn. And this is really nice way. You have to run a separate wire to the fan, which you have to snake a wire in the wall or something. But I love these switches because you can get the bathroom fan to run a little longer after you turn the light off. And that's a really nice thing. It's if somebody takes a shower, the fan should run another bunch of time, 10, 15 minutes to dry out that bathroom and prevent mold in that bathroom. This is a semi-cheap, very smart, easy thing you can do to make ventilation much better in a house. Here's some exhaust-only ventilation. The big thing, the fat piece of pipe on the right, that's a muffler. So people don't hear the noise from the fan. Fans have gotten quieter, but still might want a muffler. And the box where the duct terminates, that's where the grill goes. And we put an air regulator in there. There's a close-up of a muffler. Here's the goop going on the duct to air tighten it, both the circumferential and longitudinal seams. And here's the fiberglass mesh. That's just basically the fiberglass drywall tape. If you're doing a lot of it, you buy big rolls of fiberglass mesh, like to do the stucco, like EFIS. When you put the foam in the stucco, there's a fiberglass mesh layer. You buy that and you cut the roll with a sawzall. If you buy it on it cheap, but you're doing a few ducts, you just buy the drywall tape and you goop it again. This is a system with vacuum cleaner hoses. They don't call it that, but it's basically vacuum cleaner hoses with pretty smooth inside to improve airflow, and it just has a snap connection to boxes. They have mufflers, tees, distribution boxes. All this is what's common in Europe. The hoses fit in a 2x4 wall. One hose is kind of maybe not enough for a bedroom, so you put 2 hoses, and it really saves on labor. And they charge for this stuff. We don't use it much in New York City because it's not UL approved yet, I don't think, last I heard. But this is a nice way to do a ventilation system. That's the airflow regulator. You set it for 20 CFM or 50 or whatever. You move that sliding piece at the left, and the balloon-looking thing blows up in response to pressure drop across the device, and it limits the airflow to whatever you set it for. So you can have the bathroom get this much, the kitchen get that much, etc. It gets inserted in that box like that. So here's an apartment house roof. We have exhaust-only ventilation, and the heat is just getting dumped outdoors, so we're wasting heat. Oh, by the way, you look at the right, that's the boiler room. That short chimney, the boiler's on the roof. So instead of having a 60 or 70-foot chimney, tremendous draft pulling cold air through the hottest part of the boiler, 24/7. We put the boiler on the roof. So low draft, I think we save at least 1/3 on the fuel bill, but nobody knows, nobody's ever measured, or nobody ever talks about it. But boiler on the roof, we think we save crazy energy. So to stop this waste of just dumping heated and cooled air outdoors, here's how you measure air. You could, they sell this little thing with a propeller and it measures it. It's really good. It looks good. They're not expensive. They don't work well because you hold this in front of a grill. You don't know that the air changes all across the grill. It's mostly theater. Testing and balancing, people love them. This is a pitot tube. It measures the airflow, but you have to put it like 9 or 12 locations across the duct. It's not easy to use. When you have nothing else, you can't measure airflow with it. This is an orifice damper. See the 2 plastic tubes at left? You measure the pressure difference across this orifices. You adjust it to these numbers, and but the stickers are put on the factory at different spots, so that they're not really accurate. This is the only accurate way to measure airflow. That's a manometer. In our hand, it measures small air pressure differences, and we're measuring the pressure drop across that square hole. So the pressure drop and flow relationship across the square hole is known. So this only works for exhaust, not for a supply grill, because the supply is too turbulent. But we made this out of cardboard. But now you can buy them. The Energy Conservatory sells them. They call them, I don't know.
Henry, it's about time to wrap it up here. You want to spend a minute or so and plug your book and tell us where we can find your book?
My book is called Buildings Don't Lie, Better Buildings by Understanding Basic Building Science, and you can buy it on Amazon. And if you're in another country, I have a website called buildingsdon'tlie.com. You can buy it there. Amazon, it's only US. We're only set up to ship to the US from Amazon. So if you're in Canada or your friends in another country, you click on the website. And
You can find it on Amazon?
yeah, we sell them on Amazon. The first chapter is about heat. What is heat? How does heat move from place A to place B? Thermodynamics, the basics. What is heat? And nothing about buildings, though. The second chapter is about heat movement through buildings, insulation, heat gain from solar, all about heat. And I split it kind of like the theoretical and the practical. I stole that idea from some guys, Martin W. Stokel and his son, Martin W. Stokel. They wrote 2 books about car repair. One is about how the car works, nothing about how to fix it. The second one's about how to fix a car. I stole it from them. And then the next 2 chapters are about air, and the next 2 chapters are about water. It's all very interrelated, because when you change the flow of heat or air or water, you change the other 2. All those 3 flows are interrelated. And then there's less related chapters on fire, science and fire in buildings, and pests. There's a chapter on elevators. Nobody understands elevators very well. And there's one, how to sequence, about building enclosures, how to sequence the insulation and the other layers so you're not vulnerable to mold and leaks and problems, and how you build it robust so you don't depend on perfect materials and perfect details and perfect construction and perfect maintenance to protect the building. And there's a few short chapters at the end, the best heating, cooling, and ventilation systems to pick for a house, which is dominated by the enclosure, the energy through the enclosure, or an apartment building, which is dominated by the new system, how to deliver these things to all these different places. And then offices, which are kind of unique because you have rooms in the middle that need cooling every hour of the year because they don't touch outdoors. And then the sides need to be conditioned, heat in the winter, cooling in the summer. And then a short chapter on schools because they're ventilation dominated buildings.
Okay. Well, thanks, Henry. That was very helpful. We sure appreciate your time.